welcome to a new episode of the Bleeding Metal podcast. I am your host, Kiki, she, her, and I am here with my co-host,
Pia, she, her, hello.
Hi, and today we have a very special guest for a very interesting conversation that I've been dying to have for over a month now. So can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Toby, or you know what, Tobias. The older I get, the more I like my full name, which is Tobias. But you guys can call me Toby if you like. That's no problem. And I sing in a band called Trash Boat.
Perfect. And you played at the High Five Summerfest 6 weeks ago already.
Wow.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like that long ago, but yes. And weirdly enough, that was the last show in the summer of festivals that we had done, and the festival run across Europe is always kind of a luck of the draw thing when it comes to the routing. And it was unfortunately a very bad draw for us. We were going from one side of Europe to the other, to the other, to the other, just like in no seeming pattern. And that last day, we played Provinci Festival in Finland the night before. And we left the Finnish festival after our set at about sort of 5 p.m. And we had all our gear, all our in-ears rig, our sound desk, everything. So we all were carrying our suitcases, our backpacks, and each dragging like a big pelly case. And we had to go from the festival to the train station. We changed trains a couple times and then had to get from the train station to the airport, super tight timings. And we were dragging all this stuff. And we made it to the hotel in Stockholm after a full night's travel at about midday, and our set was at 3. So we kind of just dropped everything off, and we were just like, it's fine, we'll come back later. A few of us napped for like an hour and then went straight to the festival and played. So it was wild to get there, but it's the last day, it's fine.
Damn. Well, a nap can work miracles. So
it was crazy, but it was totally worth it. We love it in Stockholm.
Yes, it was a great party. We just did a bonus episode of the podcast about it, and that actually released today because we are recording on August 16th. And we were talking about how many of our group and also a few bands had difficulties getting there, and travel cancellations, and the lineup had to be changed on the second day. So a lot going on. But yes, then you played the main stage of High Five Summerfest, and we saw you there. And you said something when you were on stage that totally caught my attention. And I don't know if you remember exactly what you said.
Yeah, I mean, I say a similar thing before playing the song "He's So Good." Most of the time, I mean, it differs because I just kind of ad lib it and I say whatever I feel. But yeah, it's a whole spiel about identity, and I always have to choose my words very carefully here because my experience has been very passive, very sheltered. My parents were very accepting of whatever I wanted to do, however I wanted to feel, which is what I wish on everyone. And I understand that a lot of people have a lot more specific and divisive experiences when it comes to their identity, and they're still very much struggling to figure it out. So I don't want to sort of put those people down, but I try to encourage less of a focus on developing the necessity for validation to the extent where you can't really function day to day without demanding that everyone buys into your idea of your identity, because otherwise you end up just feeling horrible and you feel unliked and unaccepted and you don't feel yourself. And I know some people are going to have had childhoods where they, maybe they've suffered abuse, maybe they've suffered this and this and that. And I'm not saying like the way you feel, you shouldn't feel the way that you feel, but I just try to sort of, I don't know, bleed a little bit of my privilege out there so that maybe people can sort of just relax a little bit and not take these things so seriously and not place so much weight on it. Because when you do, you will end up being disappointed, because when you place that much significance on it and you put it out there so loudly and so proudly, most of the things that you're going to come across are sort of people that will react in a very spiteful, reactionary way, and you're not going to get the reaction that you deserve, and it's not worth it, in my opinion. I never get that. I'm waiting for someone to come and test me and to be a bigot, and I'm very confrontational. I'd love to have an argument with someone that disagreed with the fact that I paint my nails, or the fact that I might wear a crop top, or wear eye makeup, or the fact that, as a masculine presenting man, sometimes I do things that are feminine. But we can get to that later. Like, I'm waiting for someone to come and try and check me like that, but they don't, because I don't make like the biggest deal about it, and I kind of just crack on and do my thing. But I mean, I'm confrontational. I want someone to come and try and talk me out of it, because I've got words ready.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I like that attitude. Yes, first of all, before we dive into that, we're going to talk about identities. And usually, when we describe our identities, we use a lot of labels. So before we start, I would ask you to pick your 3 most important labels.
3, okay. I got 2, and I have to think about the third one. Of course, one of my identities is that I'm a metalhead, and that's something that I carry with me since, I don't know, 20 years or something. And I could not live without music. That's something that I experienced when I was at a concert a week ago. That was so great to be back at a venue with all these people and just enjoying a show and stuff like that. And then I knew, okay, well, I need this in my life, and that's definitely a part of my identity. The second word would be mother, because I have a baby since November, and I wouldn't have believed that I would feel so comfortable in this role, because I struggled a lot with this before. And I never said I definitely want to have kids. I was like, okay, maybe it happens, maybe it won't happen. If it doesn't happen, it's not so it's not difficult for me. I can enjoy other things in my life. But now I could not go back to not having my baby. And the third word, that's tricky. I guess I also
I mean, you've
identify
come
a
up with
lot.
2. I'm sat here struggling to think of one. I'm sat here right now. My hands are sweating. I'm like, I can't even think of one answer to this. It's crazy.
I think the third one might be that I'm also a journalist. That's also my day job, my profession, and that's also a big part in my life. And I really enjoy working. And there would be something missing. When I got my baby, I had 3 months where I did not work, and I was like, oh, when can I go back to work again? So yeah, that's also I felt that this also is a big part of what I need, and also a big part of my identity. But I think there are a lot of things you also have this label or this role that you play towards your parents, that you're a child, and you can also be a parent if you have children. And that's something I think is very interesting. And I think we also had this in school, where we said you have different relationships to the people in your life, and you play different roles in these relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
labels come from these relationships. Not necessarily because music is not a person, but something
Well,
that defines us also.
that's very interesting, and I agree, because I think we're very adaptable creatures, and our label, like this is another big thing. I am subject to change at any
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
I reserve my right to, if we take relationships, I reserve my right to be attracted to any single one member of the human race. And to be honest, if I meet someone and I'm talking to someone and I'm attracted to their personality and I'm physically attracted to them, then everything else is completely irrelevant, whether they're male presenting, female presenting, trans, whatever aspect. I'm not saying that these things aren't important, but they're not important for my perception of them and for my potential attraction to them. And if there might be some trans people that I'm attracted to, there might be some trans people that I'm not attracted to. And it just doesn't factor into my judgment of a person, what identity that they choose. And I was, or choose maybe the wrong word. But I don't know. Like, yeah, a musician, that's part of my identity for sure. But I see I see the adaptability element as more of a virtue and more of a sign of my identity than being a musician, because if the men came with their briefcases and their dark glasses and their pencil ties and they put the paper down on the desk and said you can no longer be a musician, that's done, that's gone, then I'm no longer a musician, like that's no longer part of my identity. And this actually happened to me when I was a lot younger, because I have a pretty devastating knee injury that started when I was 15 and persists to this day. And I defined my whole life as a teenager through sport and competition. Very competitive boy, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, rugby, tennis, loved sport, did it every day. And any day that I wasn't playing sport, I was in the gym preparing for these sports. I injured myself when I was 15. It got worse and worse. And then when I was about 19, 20, I had my fourth or fifth surgery. And the surgeon was like, you will not be able to do any of this ever again. I'm very sorry. This is bad and it's only going to get worse. We're going to have conversations about this degenerative problem that you have. And it's obviously been degenerating for the last 10 years or so. And that's the thing that I have to deal with. But that effectively happened. It was like sport was me. And then boom, they were like, no more sport, which sucked. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, what else am I good at? What other aspects of my identity can I pursue and pour my heart and soul into? And music was one of those things that I had on the back burner. So yeah, the aspects of my identity that I would choose for that question, it would be like picking my top 3 bands. That's going to change. I could choose my top 3 bands right now, and then you could ask me a week later after I've listened to a band's discography, rediscovered my love for them, and I would have different answers. So in all honesty, my brain was going, and I don't have an answer for that aspect of my identity.
But that
maybe
fits
that's just
to
me
what
being
you
difficult.
said in the beginning. Kiki, what are your 3 or whatever labels?
I was just thinking a thing that comes from my spirituality. That is, so I guess that's one of my labels. I'm a spiritual person. And I define myself through my spiritual lens as a soul with a human experience. So I guess human is a pretty vast label that we could all use.
That'll do.
But I do identify as a singer, whether I'm active or not, actively making music or not. And I do identify as a woman. That is also a very important part of my experience and my personality, I think. But you were already making connections to a next step of the conversation. All of the uses of labels, we hear about them a lot in the LGBTQIA plus community, especially when we are talking about marginalized identities, right? And that's when all of the labels are kind of important. And I have this discussion with my brother a lot. He thinks labels are not strictly necessary because they can be very divisive.
Sure.
Because of othering, right? If I identify as something, that means I'm not other things, and that makes me different than other people. And for me, labels have always been very important because I have found solace, kind of, because I have felt different for a long time, I guess. And so finding community through those labels was something that gave me a lot of comfort, and knowing that I'm not the only one, that I'm not all alone, and that there is actually, and that I belong to a certain community, right? So, but what you just said, Toby, was also very, very important. And I don't think a lot of people have this very present, that labels can change. And the most maybe even the most fundamental labels about us can change as we grow and develop. And that was something that happened on the same trip as the trip to Stockholm for the festival. After that, I went down to Malmö for the Pride celebrations. And there were several events there, and I took part in this workshop by Robin Ox. She's bisexual activist and educator from the US, and she did this brilliant workshop about that was called Beyond Binaries, and I'm going to link the handout in the description because it is about gender and sexuality being a spectrum, but also gives you the possibility of identifying outside of the spectrum, as
Yeah.
questioning, as unsure, as not feeling represented in that spectrum. And something that she also says in the beginning of the workshop, and that is part of the questions in this questionnaire, is it can change. So, how you saw yourself in your developing years, or how you see yourself now, or how you want others to see you in the future, how you want to present, can always change. And that was something I had never thought.
Totally. I split myself right down the middle here because a lot of the conversations that you hear about gender, about identity, is often depicted on YouTube or on TikTok, and it's always two people sat down. One of them is, a potentially very androgynous person with very strong opinions about binaries and identity and gender and all these things, and the other one is usually a bearded, stern, boring conservative man that has an incessant fixation on the truth and reality, and they butt heads, and they try to back each other into ideological corners by sort of repeating the same questions over and over, like, are trans women real women? Well, what is a real woman? And then they can't answer the question. And I don't really firmly side with either side, and I would like to sit in between these two people and say, right, 1 minute, this is what I think of your position, and this is how I think that you could make small concessions just to make things a lot easier. And then go to the other thing and say, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you're entirely right and you're entirely vindicated with your point of view, because I think both need to meet in the middle for a much more sort of meaningful middle ground. The binary, the male female thing, yes, I believe it's a spectrum, but I mean, there's certain function to a binary. Like you can have the wildest neo pronoun that you want, something that you've picked off of a website and chosen somewhere. That's great. I love that for you. But at the end of the day, if you're ill and you go to a doctor, why overcomplicate the discussion when someone is just trying to help you by saying, "Oh, I'm not male or female, and I do this, and this." It's like, yeah, I get that, and I want you to be able to live your truth, and I want you to be able to feel comfortable. But let's be rational here. There's no sense in bringing in something that you have chosen and that has been created specifically for you, because like the way I see a lot of these neo pronouns is it's like astrology. You know what I mean? Like it's like a star sign, and all of the star signs and all the astrological signs, each description of each one represents a part of us, right? And it's as if you could choose your astrological sign, because all of the neo-pronouns that have been invented, they've been created by someone, and you read a description that someone has made up. All things are made up. I'm not criticizing it for being made up. You read a description, you're like, oh, that describes me. I'm going to pick that one. And it's like, that's fine. But when you come across someone who has lived their entire life with the simple male female, and you then hit them with something that changes their entire lexicon, and you're like, whenever you're referring to me, you have to take this word that I have found and you have to refer to me in this manner. If it's not someone that you're close to and that already respects you and that already understands you, they're going to struggle, and that's okay. And then sort of laying that pressure on them to either buy into your identity or suffer the socially fatal consequences. It's a big ask. But also I get frustrated with the people that sit down and they're like, well, I'm not concerned about how you view yourself. I'm not concerned about your identity. I'm concerned about the truth. And the truth is there's just male and female. It's like, oh, you're fun, aren't you? Must you live so incessantly in the real world? It doesn't make too much sense to me why you wouldn't give slight concessions to someone who is obviously struggling with the idea of the binary. But yeah, I think there's conversations to be had on both sides. There's concessions to be made on both sides, and I think the sort of vitriol that people approach this conversation with from both sides only hurts the conversation. And I think that concessions to be made on both sides ideologically.
I agree with that, especially because it all comes back down to what we were just saying about change. Change is just inevitable. And from what you were just saying, change is something a lot of people struggle to cope with, which is reflected then in those discussions.
Another thing that comes with identity is also being represented somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We had this conversation a lot also in this podcast. We originally started as a magazine for women in metal. And we said, well, there are so few women represented in the metal scene that there need to be more, so that you yourself, so that the little girl can see, oh, I can be in this scene also. I can be on stage here. And
Yes.
that is also that also plays a role in this whole identity thing. When you want yourself, or you want to be represented somewhere, and therefore you first of all need a label or an identity, so that someone else with the same identity or the same label can represent you somewhere, maybe in politics or on stage or wherever.
So you can see yourself reflected in that. Yes, I agree.
I don't know whether I necessarily agree with that fully, but that might be because the majority of the things that I have engaged in my whole life, sports, music, all these things, are generally male dominated. But I never attributed my masculinity or my gender to my path. At no point when I wanted to be in sport or in music or whatever did I think, wow, it's so good to see so many men doing this thing. And I don't know what an equivalent female thing would be like.
If you wanted to go into nursing, for example.
Nursing or palliative care or something like that, I wouldn't think, oh, wow, I'm so glad that there's men that can represent me. And the more men I see doing nursing, the better job I feel like I could do. If I wanted to go into nursing, I'd be taking a lot of influence from a lot of strong and incredible women. That doesn't bother me at all. Like, as a more masculine man, I wouldn't be looking for men to show me the way in an industry that I wanted to join. I'd be looking for people that I can absorb whatever information and whatever experience I can on. But like I say, that might be a product of the male-dominated spaces that I've been in. Maybe the fact that I don't have to think about that is a privilege of my experience. But that is my mindset, and that is absolutely true. I wouldn't differentiate between men and women. I would differentiate between talent and what I felt like I could absorb from these role models, no matter what gender they are.
I can understand that. I am also very privileged because I'm white. I'm not affected by racism, and people see me as a woman. So I'm also not affected by transphobia or stuff like that. And I was also raised gender neutral. So my parents didn't say, "You're a woman. You have to play with dolls so you can be a better mother later," or stuff like that. They didn't do that. I grew up thinking that we are all equal, and then I needed to learn, and it really took me a while. It took me many, many years to learn that that's not the case, that there are people who are the minority and who are not really represented, and who are oppressed by the system. And maybe that's also the people who long for a label, so that that functions easier, because when you're a trans person and you see there is a trans person in politics, then you see, oh yeah, that's someone who knows what I struggle with. But if you're privileged and you don't struggle with anything and you can do whatever you want, then there might not be the necessity of having this identity or this representation, this reflection of something that you relate to.
100%. And people pretend that that there's this massive new wave of trans affected people hitting the world. But I mean, it's not that there's drastically more trans people. To me, it's that the visibility has massively increased.
Yes.
We have TikTok, we have YouTube, we have people who may not be fully trans, but maybe sort of experimenting with the idea that they don't fit into the stereotypes that have been presented to them. But that's the thing as well. And there's gender dysphoria. That's one thing that's a well documented illness. Maybe that's not the correct word, but there's also, I think, and this includes me, a drastic misunderstanding of exactly what men, women, masculinity, and femininity are. Because, apparently painting your nails is feminine. Apparently care and empathy is feminine. It's like, well, then I have loads of feminine traits. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen some intensely masculine women out there who, maybe they're bigger, stronger, maybe they're very competitive, they go into engineering, I don't know, but we have attributed these things like having, big muscles and size and strength as being inherently masculine because more men have them due to their biology. But these things are as malleable as we are.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people will grow up, maybe some really effeminate men, like a young boy will grow up just not really feeling like they naturally want to progress with things that are typically masculine: competition, sport, aggressiveness, and they just feel that they lean much towards the so defined feminine aspects of life and end up sort of believing that they might be trans or they might have gender dysphoria rather than just being a very effeminate man. Like I think the fine line between actual gender dysphoria and someone that is just not matching gender stereotypes with their sex that they were born with, and it's such a gray area. Who is anyone except the person to call them on that? It's so intensely subjective, and I want the absolute best for everyone. I want everyone to feel as comfortable as possible. But I don't want people to have to go through, drastic changes when they're unnecessary. But it's not for me to say. It's such a delicate position that I have, being sat here, being comfortable with my masculine and feminine traits, being comfortable with my body and the parts of my body. So with all of these points that I make, I have to choose my words very carefully, because someone could step in and be like, well, you don't know what I go through. You don't know how I feel. And that's true. Like, I can't say a thing, but like I was saying with my knee, this is one thing that I really try and avoid. And this is what I hope, I'm not accusing anyone of this, but this is something that I hope that people avoid throughout their entire life, right? Because these big issues, whether it's gender, whether it's physical, whether it's mental health, they hold a lot of power. A lot of power. I have a really, really bad knee. It hurts every single day. I'm constantly struggling. I have to do like 2 hours of painful physiotherapy every single day. Otherwise, it'll get worse faster, right? If I was an incredibly lazy person and I didn't work and I, didn't socialize, and I was sort of very snippy and lost a bunch of weight, I could sit here with anyone that came for me and I could say, yeah, well, you don't know, because my knee is intensely painful. So leave me alone. And you guys couldn't say anything. You couldn't say anything because you don't know my experience. And if I let myself sort of sink into unhealthy thought patterns and unhealthy projections, there's not a lot that even my family could say, because they have to understand what I've been through. And that is a powerful weapon. And it's a powerful weapon that I could use to exercise a high degree of control over my environment. And I think with this intense subjectivity of identity and identity politics, it can be used very divisively as a very powerful weapon to exercise control over people that you don't necessarily agree with, from both sides, not just people that are having problems with identity. So whilst I encourage exploration and I encourage uniqueness, I intensely encourage people to never weaponize their struggle, never weaponize any aspect of their identity to dominate or control a conversation or a social interaction, because that is a slippery slope and it's next to impossible to sort of
Proof
discuss.
or check. Yeah.
You can't do it. So, and there are a lot of people. I know I'm playing devil's advocate a lot here, and I know I may seem like I'm attacking people just for feeling things, and I'm really not. But there are people on both sides of the argument that do exactly that. They weaponize their struggle, they weaponize their identity, they weaponize whatever they can to shut down the discussion and just terminate things. And I disagree with that tactic.
Attitude. Yeah. Ooh, this is getting very, very interesting. I love it. It comes back to what you said in the beginning, that you are very confrontational. I go back to my point about change, because also what you were saying about gender stereotypes and expectations has always changed, or has always been changing. I mean, it's not many hundreds of years ago where high-heeled shoes were actually a very masculine thing, and the color pink was also a very masculine thing. So all of that is also changing constantly.
Yep.
And we are just subject to adhering to those expectations of our generation. So my 2 points in answer to what you just said are that I think what is destructive about the culture of discussion, especially on the internet right now in 2022, is the resisting to change in the way that we are just now learning after everything, after we are learning from the cancel culture, for example. We are learning to allow people to change and to evolve and to grow and to admit that they were wrong.
Absolutely.
And to forgive them for mistakes when they are willing to to put the work into getting better and and just being better human beings. I totally agree with what you said as well about individuals weaponizing identity to control, especially the discourse or political discourse.
I understand why they do it.
But I do think that is a very dangerous point, maybe even, because on one side we see statistics and we know how systemic oppression works. And I might even argue that is weaponizing identity.
That's exactly what I said on both sides.
Yeah, in a very massive way that is socially accepted. If we are talking, for example, about misogyny or pay gaps, etc., or the bathroom for trans people, all of these discussions that very conservative people think, okay, if we allow a person that was assigned male at birth to use a women's bathroom, they might, commit some sort of violence against the rest of the women.
The
right?
Violence argument is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and also there is no statistics or no proof to back that up, right? But these points are being made anyway in these discussions.
Yeah, and one thing that irritates me to the core is the generally conservative or right-wing just incessant clawing to this word reality, the truth. What is the truth? What is reality? It's like, well, a trans woman isn't a real woman, because what is a real woman? In my world, we live in this reality where you have an XY chromosome, whatever, right? And it's like, the thing that I don't understand is that, I saw someone score a goal in a football match, and the commentator said, "Whoa, that was that goal was an absolute bullet. It was a bullet." And this conservative person would then sit in front of that commentator and they'd say, "Well, it wasn't a bullet, really, was it? It's a ball going into a goal, because I live in reality, in the real world. So, don't call it a bullet when it's not a bullet. It's a football going into a net. It's a goal." And it's like, oh, well done. Well done. You can sit back with your ideological blockade and you can say, well, that's not real, is it? Because they have a very firm idea of their identity, and the idea of that changing or being challenged is just insane to them. And the violence argument, ridiculous. It's the same argument that has been used time and time again. It's the children. It's the same as the children.
Yeah.
Oh, think of the children. Think of the children. We can't have women vote, because if women vote, then they'll leave the house to do all their voting, and who will look after the children? Think of the children. We can't have homosexuals as teachers. What about the children? Oh, the children might. And it's like, oh, what if, if we allow people to explore their gender identity, and we allow the idea of trans people being okay and accepted human, what about the children? All our children will become trans. It's the most irritating idea and argument that people hide behind, where they'll bring out something like the truth, reality, the children, or violence. And it's just like, oh my God, yes, okay. People can lie. We've established this. People can be dishonest, and people can be dishonest about their gender identity. People can be dishonest about their identity. People can be dishonest about anything to gain or to take or to dominate or to control. Anyone can do that. So bringing it into the discussion regarding trans people and their toilets, it derails the conversation, and it takes it to a place that's hard to back, because it's like, well, yes, violence is bad.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to get assaulted in a toilet, no matter what gender they are. The only thing when it comes to trans issues, genuinely, the only sticky patch for me personally that I really cannot wrap my head around, and I don't know how to address or how to fix it, is sport. How do you have a fair representation of a trans person in sport, particularly someone that's gone from male to female, and someone that like transitioned very late and is a wrestler or something like that, and you have this trans person that has gone into a male sport and they're utterly dominating? And some, people say it's unfair. I agree to an extent. I would wager that it's also unfair that this person has suffered so much throughout their entire life that they have, changed their or made their gender match how they feel inside so late in their life. That in and itself is a struggle, and it's a struggle that I would wager is a lot heavier than the struggle of someone who's losing a sporting event. That's something that I wouldn't. But that's the only thing that I can't wrap out. Like toilets, if you're trans, if you're male to female, just use a toilet, or like non-binary, non-gendered toilets. Fine, cool.
Yeah, gender neutral toilets work amazingly.
Like,
that was really good. Really? I think I don't have a solution either, but I think just like in sports, what you were just describing, just like in other structures, like for example the armed forces, both are, it's the parallel that I am thinking of right now. Both are institutions that are pretty old, and when they were establishing their processes and their working processes and traditions or whatever, there was this very very strict division of biology. So it's not gender, it's actually sex, right?
Sure.
Biological sex. And how to get over that, how to I don't know, could we just not make everything gender neutral, and the best athletes would be the best athletes? And I have no idea.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I've had this discussion a few times with a few friends of mine, because it is an interesting discussion. It is so grey, and there is no easy solution. And the unfortunate fact is, and maybe people are going to jump on me for this, but if you took the vast majority of sports, particularly very physical sports, football, boxing, mixed martial arts, rugby, whatever, if you were to make them all gender neutral and mix, women would win so rarely that I think it would devalue their participation in the sport. Because if you were a woman trying to be a professional boxer, and when you make it to a certain level, you have to start fighting men, the odds of you becoming a champion boxer as a woman, if you're fighting men, are devastating. And, would women en masse be comfortable with competing with men all the time and close to never winning? I don't know, because I'm not a woman, and I can't speak for that. But I don't know whether that would be an effective solution. But yeah, it's like you say, it's it's impossible to nail it down.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, maybe just we have to rethink all of these structures completely new and find new ways to evaluate competitive sports and or other types of activities that are divided like that by biological sex, that have been divided that way or categorized that way so far. But yeah, I think we are the discussion is amazing, but we are going away a little bit from the topic. And one of the things that we were talking before and also stuck out to me is about the language. I don't know if you introduce yourself with pronouns. Do you use pronouns when you? Not at all.
I mean, obviously I do, because everyone uses pronouns because it's in language, and I'm not going to sit
Mm-hmm.
here and be like, I don't use pronouns. It's ridiculous. I refer to people with pronouns all the time because it's literal language. But I encourage people to guess,
Okay.
because and if someone if someone, most of the time when someone uses your pronouns, you're not going to be in the room, because if we were having a discussion, when would I ever refer to you as she if I were talking to you directly?
Yeah.
You only really say, oh, she did this, she did that. You
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be here. And if someone takes it upon themselves to use either gender neutral or feminine pronouns for me,
Mm-hmm.
it just would not factor into my day at all.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, and even if someone was trying to do it really venomously and they were like, oh, she's trying to do this, I'd just be like, this is a big old you problem, and this has absolutely no bearing on my day, and it does not bother me at all. So yes, obviously people will use male pronouns because I'm very male presenting. There are elements of masculinity as we understand it today that I definitely do not embody, and there are definitely elements of femininity as we understand it today that I embody fully. So I guess the argument could be made that I could use gender neutral pronouns, but I personally see no facility in them,
Yeah,
to be honest.
I can relate to that so much because I feel the same. I would not want to have a discussion about it, and I just don't care if someone refers to me as Mister. Then I would be like, okay, if you if you think so, do that. Um, and that has always been the case. I've when I went to a festival, in previous times I used to wear white clothes and a hat and sunglasses, and sometimes the male securities were checking me for weapons and stuff. They don't usually do that, and they were like, oh, sorry, I thought you were a man. And I was like, yeah, fine. Just
Sure.
go on and let me enjoy the festival. But I think there are people out there who really care about that, and that's, for me, I decided for myself that I do not care if someone says I'm, or I don't care about the pronouns that people have for me. But I think it's also, or I respect if people are aware of that and they want specific pronouns to be used. And then I, I also try to use them, even though I'm not used to have them, because as you said, there are so many pronouns that people can pick.
Yeah, I would find it really difficult to use a custom pronoun for someone. If I really cared about them and I really respected them and I fully understood their motivations for having that pronoun, then I would try my best. I would try my best. But
Yeah.
and like, I think the only thing that can be made close to a concrete argument is, the gender neutral pronoun. It's an interesting idea. And when people are like, no, it's only men and women, it's like, oh god, it's only one more. Like, it's not that difficult to refer to someone as they or them. It's actually quite easy. You can do it with both genders. But and this is very personal. Me personally, I do not see the facility in a gender neutral pronoun, because when you're born with a certain sex, um, that's one thing, but your gender presentation is so malleable, so malleable. And if
Mm-hmm.
you genuinely feel that there are, elements of masculinity as you understand it that you just hate, you don't like it, you're male presenting, you were born a male, but there are so many aspects of like toxic masculinity that you just hate, you can't stand them, so you abandon them and you change your pronouns. Or, maybe you don't link up with either and you end up choosing a gender neutral pronoun. For me, if if you're moving so fluidly between the two, either way, then a gender neutral pronoun is the same as either. Having your pronouns be they them is effectively the same as saying, well, it could be male or female. So just sort of appropriate a gender presentation that suits you, and then have people guess, and then they can't guess wrong. That's how I would feel. I would never choose I'd never choose to be referred to as they them, because if I were truly feeling that androgynous, then either is fine. I don't despise masculinity and femininity so much that I don't want either, and I refuse to buy into this idea of masculinity and femininity. Yeah, I agree that it's a spectrum, and I agree that people can move fluidly across it depending on their mood, sure. But I don't hate both sides so much that I would disregard both in exchange for a gender neutral pronoun permanently. As in, like, you have to use this pronoun or else. That's where it gets a little bit like, I mean, just I'm trying to engender, pun not intended, I'm trying to engender comfort with your situation without demanding or requiring the validation of a pronoun that you have chosen in order to feel comfortable. That's how I feel. And I know that's not how loads of people feel. Loads of people are going to disagree with me, but that's how I feel.
I think that is a very personal thing. I myself favor the they them from when it's a person I don't know, and I present myself, or I am trying my best. So every time I introduce myself, to say my pronouns are she her, because those are important-ish to me, and also just to make a point of making people aware or spreading the word, so to speak, that pronouns are important for some people, as Pia was saying. And that is the thing. I think treating a person or calling a person by their chosen pronouns is kind of an act of kindness for me.
Yes.
Because for us to change that language is just one word, as you were saying, and it's just this tiny tuning that we have to do. But for that person, it can be the world. It's just a kind of kindness that I think we should all have, with basic human respect for one another.
Wholeheartedly agree.
And on the other hand, I think it's also amazing how gay men, as far as I know, have made it a point as well of calling themselves girl or she. And
I've seen enough RuPaul's Drag Race to...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love that.
Love it.
And it's just so... it's this kind of super cute and amusing thing that can have this shocking effect on many people, and that also helps the cause, so to speak. We just need to be curious about every person's experience and ask kindly or respectfully, what are your pronouns? How do you see yourself? I don't know. I before assuming. That is something that I try to do a lot, especially when, for example, I know, Toby, you are a Twitch streamer yourself as well, and when we see people come into the chat and with these sometimes amazingly creative usernames, we just don't know who's behind that and what their feelings are, what their identities are. So just not assuming their gender and maybe asking, or just just pointing out that they might want to share how they identify, or I don't know, just driving that point so that more and more people know that we are all very complicated human beings and identify in very, very different manners, and with probably several labels, as we have discussed today. And we should first of all respect that, and also just not draw conclusions from the stereotypes that we are used to and that we have been raised into, and rather ask the person for their own experience and their own chosen identities, maybe. Yeah, that can also change.
Yeah, I want to respect everyone. I want everyone to feel comfortable. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And there's just something that sits in my core, like fundamentally within me, that says that labeling and micromanaging and the grouping together of people based on personality traits or identity, it doesn't have that much positive function, because it's in potentially infinite series of things that you can choose. And I love that people can be expressive, and I love that they can find ways of describing themselves and, like you say, grouping together within communities and feeling seen and all this kind of stuff. But it's when you bring that to the rest of the world and demand that they play too, that is when you're going to encounter resistance for a number of reasons. The biggest one is just apathy. Like, a lot of people are just like, I don't want to play this game. I want the rules to be as simple as the way that I've understood them my whole life. And that's okay too. It's not a bad thing that you've got, a man who's just a man and he doesn't have any feminine traits and he doesn't want to buy into this gender identity thing and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's okay. And it's important that this person be respectful and not, not be derogatory towards someone who's experimenting with their identity. But I think it's also important for the person that's experimenting with their identity to not place so much intrinsic value on this identity being validated by everyone
All the time. Yeah.
all the time, that because they're just going to end up disappointed, and it's going to be something that's going to be like really difficult for them to come to terms with, and then they're going to end up well, why don't you like this? Why can't you discuss this with me? Why can't you call me by this pronoun? That's not very nice. And some people just don't want to. And it's like,
yes,
I would encourage those people that don't want to be a little bit more curious, be a little bit more outgoing, be willing to make certain concessions and certain changes. But then I would also encourage the people that are being very experimental to understand that this is a very rare thing for people to go through. And I don't know, sort of segregating yourself with these labels and making them more and more specific with each passing year is, it's like late stage capitalism. It's going to get more and more broad, and there's going to be more and more individual labels, and each label is going to require their own validation, their own rules, their own this. And it's going to just, it's basically leading to the point like, yes, we are all unique. We are all our own individual person, and that's okay. But, expecting everyone in the world to recognize my uniqueness and validate every aspect of my uniqueness under pain of cancellation, it's a big ask. It's a big ask.
And it's also very exhausting. I think we've made this point in the podcast before. We always talk about mental health as well. And we ask as well everybody to check with yourself and with your energy levels, because when entering this type of discussion and when trying to explain how you identify and why, that can sometimes draw a lot of energy, especially when you are confronted with a lot of resistance. And just making all those points and trying to explain so that somebody you maybe won't ever see again just understands and accepts you can be really, really, really exhausting. And and just eat away at your mental health sometimes. So sometimes it's just not worth it, not worth making that point and wasting that energy trying to change somebody else's mind.
Yeah, 100%. It's so intensely personal, and
yes.
It does feel good to have an identity that you have curated yourself be validated by the rest of the world. If you create a character, or maybe you create an alternate persona for a YouTube channel, I don't know, like, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, and it does feel great having that validated. But at the end of the day, it's not, it doesn't always work like that. And I don't know whether it should or shouldn't. I can't say that, and I wouldn't ever presume to say that. We all think we're so worldly. We all think that we have such a firm understanding of what masculinity is. Like, I understand masculinity so much that I am abandoning masculinity, and I'm choosing feminine pronouns because I understand femininity to its core. I understand femininity, and therefore I have chosen feminine pronouns. It's like, well, I don't presume to understand a damn thing. I understand each moment as it comes, and each decision that I make, and the decision I make to dress in a so-called effeminate way or act in a so-called masculine way could potentially change day to day. And
Yeah.
I don't have the conviction to pick a pronoun because if I'm like, oh well, I'm non-binary now, and because I don't agree with the idea of masculine things being masculine and feminine things being feminine, I believe that it's all a big mix and we should all be gender neutral and blah, blah, blah. It's like I don't have the conviction to choose that, and I wouldn't choose it because then that invites so much. I'm lazy. It invites so much complication, and it would disappoint me to go out and have, if I was in interviews or if I was talking to people and they're all using the wrong pronouns and I just be getting stressed out. I'd be like, no, that's not how I feel today. I feel different, and you should refer to me. It's like I let it all pass me by because I believe that it's important to explore it. And I think that the conversation is good, and we should understand that everyone is unique and has their own unique experience when it comes to gender. But also, don't put so much weight on it. Don't require so much from it, because it's so much simpler to just be who you are unapologetically, but sort of like calm and quiet, rather than big and bold and reactive and aggressive and constantly stirring up like conversations, whether it's left or right or whatever. I am whoever I am that day, and people perceive me however they choose to perceive me. And if I'm feeling particularly masculine that day, and I've done a good job of appropriating masculinity as it's understood, which I'm generally quite good at because I'm built like a man and I have very masculine features, so I'm good at passing as a man, and people will use the masculine pronouns, and it's like, well, that's easy for me. If I wanted to be a lot more effeminate, I'd obviously struggle convincing the general public that I'm so feminine that they would assume and use feminine pronouns. That would be very difficult for me. And I understand that would be really hard for someone. If you're born a man, or if you're born masculine presenting, you have so much feminine feeling and feminine energy that you wish that you could present yourself in a way where people would just guess that you have female pronouns, and you have to live with the fact that that's not really possible. That's rough. That's really, really difficult. And I encourage people on the right and the more sort of conservative side to be a lot more understanding, and to not sit back on that truth and reality argument that just it's that's the impossible wall. You can't get past that, because it's like, well, it's an ideological corner that's hard to talk your way out of. But yeah, I try to not put so much significance on identity that I need it, and I need to be validated by other people for it.
And that is a very healthy attitude if and when we all can enjoy the same rights and opportunities, which is where the labels come in handy when it gets very political, and when when it is actually important to have these discussions as well, so that we realize that some of those identities are still persecuted in several parts of the world, and just don't have the same rights, representation, etc., as other labels and identities. Yeah, but that was also a very eye-opening attitude and perspective to hear from. Thank you so much, Toby.
Yeah,
That's all good. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be listening, and they're going to be like, oh my God, this guy is just saying words. He's just talking utter shite. Because there's no right answer here.
Exactly. And also there is no need to be right and or wrong, especially since we are all just learning.
Yep. I choose the path of least resistance. which is in contrast to my confrontational nature. I do
Mhm.
like having discussions. I do like arguing with people, and I particularly sort of, I might say one thing, but then if someone on the other side of the argument is very blasé, very facetious, and very sort of like stubborn, I might all of a sudden be like, well, now I care. All right, well, now that you've shown that you're going to be this difficult and this obtuse when talking about this, well, yes, you know what? Let's actually talk about it. But aside from that, in general, in life in general, I choose the path of least resistance, particularly when it comes to identity. Other people's assumptions about me are their assumptions. I can only understand myself, and I can only be responsible for my own identity and myself, and making sure that I'm comfortable dressing and doing and acting and saying and loving whoever I feel like in that particular moment. And if that is abhorrent to some people, then
That's their problem.
it's their abhorrence. Like, they're the ones that have to feel that feeling. It's like living in an
Yeah.
ugly house, and it's like, it's your neighbor that has to look at it. Like,
Yeah.
it truly doesn't bother me.
That's a really cool metaphor. And I think that's also a great point to slowly come to the end of our awesome talk.
Sure. And if you feel as well, if you strongly disagree with anything that I've said, my confrontational nature isn't like, I'm not going to dislike you for disagreeing with me, even if you really think like you have just said something that I think is totally wrong. Please, like, because the adaptability element of my personality, like, I think things, but I'm open to change, even with my sort of fundamental thought. I'm always open to being sort of proven wrong, or learning, educating, growing, however you want to say it. So
That's a good trait of character, and also being able to change your mind. And also, we don't have to agree with everything. There are some points where we have to agree, and we can't be with people who don't agree with some of our opinions. But there are so many opinions and so many topics where it's just okay to disagree, and we can still be friends and have conversations about different things if that upsets us too much to talk about that. Yeah, we don't have to agree with everything 100%.
Yes. Agree to disagree is always an option. We don't
Yeah.
always have to be right.
totally. And like, if I came across a very stubborn person and I was like, my pronouns are he, him, and they said, no, I'm going to refer to you as they, them, I'd be like, okay. Like,
You
it
do
just
you.
it wouldn't it just, and I'd like to think that people can adopt that mindset where it's like, my pronouns are they, them, and it's like, well, you look like a man, so I'm going to say he, him, and they'd be like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Because there is like that's mean. That is a mean thing for someone to do, and it's a lazy thing for someone to do. And I'm not encouraging people to do that, and I'm not saying that it's virtuous that someone wants to not engage with this whole pronoun game. However, if you come across someone that is like that, the far easier route is to just be like, okay, because it's like,
And not to take it personally. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like that psychological trick when someone says something in an argument that is so flagrantly wrong or stupid. The best thing you can do after they say it is 5 to 10 seconds of silence, and not to immediately say something back. Because if you immediately say something back, then you buy into the idea that this is a back and forth discussion and that there's some merit to the thing that they've just said. But if they say something incredibly stupid and you just look at them and you give them 5 to 10 seconds to think about it, it just highlights how idiotic what they said actually is. The thing they said. So, and it's the same if someone misgenders you, then just sort of give them 5 to 10 seconds to realize how silly being that mean is.
Yeah.
And then just kind of be like, and then just move on, because it's like, whatever.
Life hacks.
Really, like, for real, like.
Yeah, that is incredibly practical. I will start using that in my daily life now. That is awesome. All right. So the big question, the big end question of our show is, what music have you been listening to lately?
Can I start?
Yes.
Ooh, yes, please.
Because I'm completely hyped about the Halo Effect. It's a band with ex-In Flames members. The singer of Dark Tranquility is also the singer there. He was also the singer on the first In Flames album. And they play melodic death metal, which I used to listen to a lot. And then I listened to a lot of metalcore. And now I'm completely on the melodic death metal train again. I'm also hyped for the new In Flames stuff because they released some really cool songs. I did not like their past 2 or 3 albums that much. A Sense of Purpose was the last album that I really listened to a lot. And yeah, the new album might be something for me to listen to again. And yes, I'm obsessed with the Halo effect at the moment.
Very nice.
Awesome. What about you, Toby?
Does this have to specifically be new music? Because I
No.
cannot lie, I have not been listening
Nope.
to a lot of new music recently. I mean, obviously, look, Glow On by Turnstile is phenomenal. That's a really easy answer because of
Yes.
how
In
objectively
my top
good that
10
album is
albums.
and how just
Yeah,
fun and interesting that band are. But in general, I've been going down sort of memory lane a little bit, particularly because we've been writing new music. And one of the things that I did as a sort of creative experiment was I have like a bag. I'll get it real swift. Hang on. In this bag right here
He shows us a plastic
is
bag.
most of the CDs that I amassed when I was sort of 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And I used to walk home from school with a CD Walkman, and I would listen to these. And I listened to almost exclusively all of these CDs whilst writing the songs that we've just been writing. Oh my goodness, what have we got here?
I find it amazing that you still have a CD player.
I don't. This is just something that I can't bring myself to throw away. I've moved 4 times in the last 18 months, and every time I move, I throw away more and more things because I have less and less space. And I've just been hanging on to this, and it's a lot of Queens of the Stone Age, Muse, Pantera, controversially. There's Notorious B.I.G. in here. This is one of the most incredible albums ever written, Origins of Symmetry by Muse.
Hell yeah.
They're absolutely incredible. But there's even like some more niche things here. Forgotten Soul, Brutality Will Prevail. Anyone that wants to know about the uncrowned kings of UK hardcore, Brutality Will Prevail. Any album from Scatter the Ashes and beforehand is just absolutely insane. Dirty Money, literally one of the best UK hardcore bands ever, with a Scouse singer who's got a really interesting accent. One of the craziest shows that ever happened was at the Underworld when they did their final ever show. Absolutely insane. And loads of stuff in here. A Day to Remember, Basement, Verse. So lots of massive. This is an insane album. The lyrics, if you're a lyricist and you want to write good lyrics, read the lyrics to anything by Verse, particularly this album, Aggression, is incredible. And another one for lyrics is called Somewhere at the Bottom of the River Between Vega and Altair by La Dispute. Another incredible lyrical experience. So yeah, I just dipped into my nostalgic bag and I listened to every single CD that I had. But obviously, I got it up on Spotify. I didn't listen to the CD itself because I don't have a CD player. But yeah, that's all the music.
That's awesome.
That's all the music that I've been listening to recently. But none of it's new. And maybe I should have been listening to some new stuff, but I didn't.
That's great. That's really cool.
I'm also still addicted to Turnstile. I always listen to that when I take a shower.
Incredible band. They've done
Gets me in
everything right.
party mode.
Everything. The aesthetic, the vibe, the music,
Yeah.
everything. They've just hit the nail on the head. They've done so well.
That's awesome. After all those amazing recommendations, I'm just going to add one song from the Disney movie Encanto. Trivium singer Matthew Heafy did a cover of Surface Pressure, which is, in my opinion, the best song of the movie. So I love that he did that cover. It's amazing. I love it.
That sounds sick.
Yeah, it just came out like 2 weeks ago. It's really, really good. You should totally listen to it.
Will do.
By the way, Matt Heafy is also doing a feature on the Halo Effect album.
Right. Yeah, he was promoting it as well. Yes. Awesome. Is there anything you have to promote, Toby? Upcoming dates, releases, your Twitch channel?
Yeah, twitch.tv/Toby Duncan. If you like me being a sweaty tryhard at FromSoft games, particularly Elden Ring at the moment, that's what you're going to get for the most part on my Twitch. I've been thinking about like really intensely diversifying my But like, I've got so many ideas, and I don't know whether to put them all on one platform or whether to spread them around multiple platforms, or whether to like start a Patreon or put it all on YouTube. I don't know. But in terms of promotion, we got new songs. We got one tune that we recorded 2 songs in the studio recently. One of them we got like the stems back for recently. It sounds insane. That will be coming up. We've obviously got our US tour with Enter Shikari for any American people that are going to be listening. That's coming up next month. But yeah, we've had we've had a little while to write music, and we'll be trickle releasing songs over the coming months in preparation for. I don't know whether it's going to be a new album, but it's songs. It's going to be songs. We're going to release songs, and if we end up releasing enough songs that we can call it an album, we'll do that. But yeah, new music, and I don't know, just whatever I can come up with in terms of content. As like I said, I got loads of ideas, but I don't know where to begin. I'm paralyzed by indecision.
Awesome. That means everybody has to stay tuned on your social media, maybe? Where can people find you?
Trashboat UK on everything, and I'll be Toby Duncan on everything. TOBI, Toby Duncan.
Awesome. Pia, where can people find you?
I am power_Pia almost everywhere. I'm mostly active on Instagram.
Same.
Hell yeah. Same. And I'm Kiki, EG87 everywhere. But yeah, Insta Stories is almost everything you'll get from me. And we are the Bleeding Metal Podcast and or Bleeding Metal Pod everywhere. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Spotify. That's the thing. And enjoy the bonus episode we just released. When this comes out, it's going to be 2 weeks ago. And otherwise, we will be back next month. Thank you so much, Toby, for your time and for your wisdom. This has been a very interesting conversation. And see you soon.
Thank you for having me. And I'm happy to come back and defend myself whenever the reaction to this podcast comes in, if it comes in a negative light.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We might have to take you up on that. What?
Defend your point of view. It's like, oh no, what have I done?
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks so much. See you later.
Bye-bye.